no intro. No intro. We are live. No intro. We don't get an intro anymore because I'm too cheap to pay for an intro.
Intros, they're overrated.
They are overrated. They just waste your time. I mean, Jesus. Yeah. Anyway, so Rebekah again. Rebekah again. Hang on a second if I can. Oh my goodness, it's going to do this to me. Okay. Anyway, Rebekah did a stream called "Is Evolution Scientific or Religious? Share your thoughts." And I stopped in to talk to her. And I think.
So did she at any time like pull up a dictionary or Stanford Encyclopedia Philosophy or whatever definition of religion and do like a checklist?
No, I asked her.
Absolute definitive, but sure is a good way to start.
I asked her what she meant by religion. And she said, metaphysical claims, I guess, is what she was talking about. Yeah, I know. She wasn't talking about worship. She was talking about metaphysics. Yeah, I know. So she's very confused. That's obvious. She remains confused. So let's see here. Anyway, I tried to get through to her with a real simple scenario.
Oh.
And
you don't know how hard work that is to break things down for some people.
I know. It's amazing how they don't. Let's see here. Where are we? We're theater mode. Come on, theater mode. Go theater mode. Theater mode. Okay, I'm just going to play a little bit of this because it kind of sets us up for capacity and stuff like that. What's that? What'd you say, Scott?
Thanks for the warning.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Austin, but anyway, when you got your food, he's in the side chat.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh.
Hey.
Austin, there he is.
You get some food, all right? We'll send you the link if you want it.
Yep. Yeah. Do you have his email? Oh no, we have the group chat. We can put the link out there.
Yep.
Let me go ahead and do that. Plus, or do you want to do that? Do you want to do that for me while I play this?
I really can't send it easily to through my email, my chat, my messaging.
Okay, boomer.
I am a boomer.
Yep.
I feel boomier every day.
Yep. Okay. I'll put it out there for everybody in our chat, including Austin. So, okay, I'm going to play. Now I'm going to try to play this. Is it going to work? Let's just try it again. So, this idea that evolution is a religion. Okay, I was on with Sygart a couple days ago, and he's an old Earth evolutionist, basically. So he believes that we descended, all mammals descended from a common population. But he believes in God, and he believes in the resurrection and Jesus and all of that. So, but I believe the same thing as Sygart. So, and that's evolution, and so I study that. I study that common ancestry of all mammals, basically, and I study common ancestry of all primates, right? And we have vastly different metaphysics. So how do you explain that? If evolution has to be a metaphysical religion that insists that God doesn't exist, then how do you explain Sygart? Pretty simple, right? Simple and to the point.
Also, another believer who has a really great handle on evolution, but he's not a young Earth creationist, is Clint of Clint's Reptiles.
Oh, and Dr. Joel Duff, too.
Joel Duff. I'm sure there's plenty more that we're unaware of.
Right. And so I don't understand how it can be a religion if these guys believe in it, too. I think what they're confusing here is that young Earth creationism is not just a religion, it's a cult. It's a particular tiny little religious sect where they stand in opposition to all the other Christians out there, probably a billion of them, that fully accept that the earth is not 6,000 years old and all of that. And they, what they want to do is they want to set up this false dichotomy, basically. And they want to make it like, either young earth creationism is true or atheism is true, one or the other. And evolution has nothing to do with atheism. And this false dichotomy is the game that they're playing. And they play it in kind of a neat way. If you start talking about the common ancestry of humans and chimps, right, the common ancestor, they'll start talking about abiogenesis. If you start talking about the common ancestor with mammals, they'll start talking about the Big Bang. If you start talking about the basically last eukaryotic common ancestor, they'll start talking about the evolution of chemicals and planets. I mean, you can't get them to sit still. Oh, you just replied to me. How about that, Dr. Thompson? I'm going to send you a link anyway, because yeah, you finally saw my email. That's really cool. I've been waiting for months for you to see my email. I'm not complaining. I just sent you a link to the to this stream. Anyway, so what did I do? Let's see. Okay, if I do this and I do this.
I figure as a Rebekah survivor, Dr. Chris deserves to be up here.
Oh yeah, I invited him to my 12-step recovery group for getting over Rebekah. Rebekah addiction. I started a group, and we have meetings every Tuesday at 8 p.m. And we're trying. We realize we're powerless over Rebekah, and that our lives had become unmanageable. And that's first step.
As well as her arguments.
Right. So anyway, I came up with something that I named local or bounded historical naturalism. And LBHN is a method we already use in ordinary life and in science. We bracket ultimate metaphysics and reconstruct local history from evidence and testable causes. We do it when we lose keys, investigate crimes, walk around the room, and explain development, like from the zygote to the mouse or acorn to an oak. I apply the same method to evolution. I can be agnostic about what, if anything, happened before a pro-mammal ancestral population. In other words, I can pick any part of that tree and defend forward evolution from that point. And that limits the discussion to everything from that point forward. You cannot go ahead and start talking about the Big Bang or any of this other bullshit that they love to muddy the waters with, right? The question I'm answering is local, given that population, what natural processes explain mammalian diversity today? So LBHN gives a principled reply to the "but you exclude miracles" complaint, because we don't. We're not making any claim about whether miracles are possible or not. You can say LBHN doesn't declare miracles impossible. It declares them methodologically idle unless they generate independent, checkable constraints, because otherwise they explain everything and therefore nothing. So is that clear? So it's so it's a tool.
Clear. In fact, I think I've heard we mentioned Clint Laidlaw a few minutes ago. I've heard him explain it that way. Why we don't talk about miracles? Yeah, in science.
Yeah, we're not like with methodological naturalism. In Austin's stream just now, his guest said that methodological naturalism claims that everything is natural. No, it doesn't. It's only claiming that we are going to use natural causes and natural mechanisms to figure out what's going on. If you lose your keys, if your milk is sour in the fridge, if you want to make a ham sandwich, you're going to use methodological naturalism. You're not making any metaphysical claim about what everything is or everything is not. You're not saying that the supernatural is impossible. You're saying that if it happens, uh, it's probably going to screw your experiment up, and it's going to give us pause. But so far, none of our methodological naturalistic experiments have found anything supernatural that we can track well enough to claim that, oh yeah, something like that happened, right? So we don't care. So we're just agnostic about it. And that's the thing that yeah, like when you're talking about evolution, they keep muddying the waters, and they'll keep running around with the goalpost, like from 14 billion years ago to the present or even the future, and you cannot get them to sit still long enough to have a discussion about how something evolved or how something differentiated or whatever. And this is tells me that you cannot have a reasoned discussion with them. Does it not? I mean, how can you have a reasonable discussion with somebody that wants to start talking about the Big Bang? Or like I've got this Frank guy I'm talking to, Frank Huber, something or another. And he started today talking about geology and bringing up, well, if the Earth is older than 10,000 years old, the entire Earth would have eroded and it would be flat. I mean, that's kind of what they think, right?
Yeah.
And so I did. So then I got to go out and start talking about geology. It's like, God, we were talking about evolution.
Well, it's
now
like
you want to talk about geology.
When I try to have a discussion with my 4-year-old grandson,
yeah,
he just doesn't stick to the topic for very long.
Why?
It's very frustrating.
Why? Yeah. Yep. Here we go. So LBHN is a default operating system of everyday reasoning, which is common sense reasoning. LBHN is what competent minds do constantly. You don't start with lost keys, maybe an undetectable agent popped up out of space-time. You reconstruct local causal history using ordinary causes, last known location, habit, plausible pathways, witnesses, your memory, physical traces. For crime investigators, don't begin with cosmic metaphysics. Criminology is not a religion. Searching for your keys is not a religion. Evolution is not a religion. In both cases, you're not making a theological claim like no supernatural event ever occurs. You're making a method claim. Within this bounded problem, infer using causes that generate checkable traces and constraints. Dr. Chris. So
hello.
Are you going to join my 12-step group for?
I desperately need it. It's true.
I'll say real quick that, and I've spoken with you about this, Mike. That to me, I see the progress of science from the 19th century onward to today as an attempt to strip off the metaphysical unnecessary trappings, shall we say,
right,
to science. I mean, that's not saying that we don't have metaphysical biases we bring into it. I mean, look at with Austin's discussion earlier on his channel. You had a difference with his guest Damien about is naturalism common sense or just naive realism common sense? And he says, no, the common sense isn't that great and everything. And, we have disagreements metaphysically, but we try to strip off as many of those metaphysical biases and assumptions as possible, even though you do have to bring some into your approach.
Yeah, but you don't need it when you're talking about evolution, actually. You can be very agnostic about, all the metaphysics and supernatural stuff. What you're trying to find out is how, just like with everyday common occurrences that we deal with on a daily basis, like where we parked our car, we were looking for what can physically happen causally, right? So we're looking at physical causes. We're looking at things that we can understand and we can count on. We're not making a claim about the Big Bang. God's sake. Anyway.
Dr. Chris, you've either had some really interesting plastic surgery done, or is this one of your subjects of study?
It is a subject of study there, actually.
Okay. Whose brain is that? Whose brain is that?
That's a Xenopus laevis tadpole brain in the middle there.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, it's the icon I use for my channel. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. They're wonderful because they're basically like swimming petri dishes with tiny little brains growing on the inside of them. So.
Well,
awesome.
At the very top, this is what pareidolia. I see an owl. It looks like this kind of the fake shape of a barn owl or something.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I see a little birdie. I don't know. Anyway, no, actually, I saw a brain right away. So brain development's amazing. I have I just pulled a book off my shelf called Molecules to Networks. Are you familiar with that textbook?
No.
It's the one they use at the University of Minnesota for neuroscience, and it gets very much into the membrane channels and neurotransmitters and how all that works and how the families of neurotransmitters are related to each other. Sure. It's really cool. Yeah,
that's very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. I just got a new textbook, Principles of Brain Evolution by George Strider. It's a little old, published almost 20 years ago now. But it's one that's been on my list to get for a while, and I was actually inspired to do this because of one of Rebekah's recent videos where she had that goofy ass guy on talking about how the brain disproves evolution.
Oh yeah. I went through a whole thing on that.
Yeah,
that was where that was where they claimed that this paper said that there were 900 orphan genes in humans that weren't in chimps. And so I went out. I don't know if you followed what I did, but it was paper by some Gorani or something like that. And it said they used 900 novel genes, right, to determine if there was a correlation between genetics and IQ. And that paper cited another paper which actually did the study, which was Savage. And Savage did not use the word novel, he used the word new genes. And what they meant is that the old study used something like 70 genes, and the new study used 900 genes. They didn't say anything about chimpanzees or novel genes or orphan genes, but that's how they read it. And they said it. They said, Rebekah, you need to correct yourself. And she said, if I have to correct myself, let me know. And I did let her know, but she never corrected herself.
Of course. Yeah.
So they kept the bullshit out there that they're like, I went through and I pulled up every one of those 900 genes, and I ended up finding 26 that weren't in the latest T2T build of the chimp genome that were in humans. So I found 26, not 900. And the 26 I found, each one of them had a correlate with the chimp that wasn't annotated.
Yeah, it's just not annotated.
Not annotated. Yeah.
Now the human genome is the one of the most thoroughly annotated genomes, and it's not surprising that you're going to find some that are not annotated in the chimp genome. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find a number LOC 165753, and it corresponds to a gene, and you got to check them, and and there are genes that we could call orphan genes, but then when I looked into orphan genes, not a single one of them were without a genetic correlate in the chimpanzee. Not a one. Even the favorites that they came up with when they first starting about orphans, ORFANs. I looked into them, and sure enough, I did a blast on the chimp genome, and it was right there. And it was like, so not one of those orphan genes are just like popped up out of nowhere, and that's kind of what they're trying to present. I have some tools now, and I can use those tools to go ahead and call bullshit on what they say pretty quickly. So
it's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I've got a really neat programming system set up where I can pull up human and chimp genome genes, and compare them side by side. And I did the T to T human and T to T chimp, the very latest builds we have. And I'm running all these correlations between them, and it's kind of cool. It's the only way to compare chimps to humans is to go and look at the actual exons and introns, and the actual facts.
Yeah, the actual sequences. Yes,
facts.
I totally agree.
Yeah, we call them facts.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, the
pattern
pattern that lays before us.
Yeah,
absolutely. And there needs to be some sort of explanation, as you kept telling her. And that's that isn't. And if we're trying to answer that question and we observe these patterns and we want to come up with a naturalistic mechanism to explain it, well, one, we got to know if that naturalistic mechanism has the potential to explain it, and two, is that pattern that we see consistent with the hypothesis that we have developed over the years? And of course it is.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
therefore it's not religion.
Yeah. Later on, she asked me for evidence, and I gave her some evidence. I talked about the introns and all that, and she said, "But that's not evidence." But she kept saying, "That's not evidence because God could have done it that way."
Right.
I mean, it's like, okay, God could have done it that way. It could be last Thursdayism. Zeus could have done it that way. The unicorn could have done it that. A lot of things could have done it that way. Sure. But I mean, it's still evidence for the hypothesis.
You think in her mind she just automatically inserts like a hidden HTML code or something? That's not evidence against God.
Yep.
Because it is evidence. It's evidence for your model and of evolution or that particular field of study. But nobody's trying to disprove God. They're just saying this is the evidence for the theory.
Right.
Yeah. They're projecting heavily because they are so stuck on this idea. Young Earth creationists don't really believe in God. They believe that evolution is false and therefore God. So they don't really have any faith, like Dr. Joel Duff and Sykart and all these old Earth creationists have some faith in this religion that they talk about, right? But Rebekah has even said that if evolution were true, she'd quit believing. And it's like, wait a minute, that's pretty shallow. So their whole thing is trying to put us on the same level as their crazy ass metaphysical story,
I mean, look, actually, I can sort of respect that to some degree.
Can you? Really?
Yes, I can. If you have to accept that, if you take the fundamentalist belief, the fundamentalist approach to the Bible, that everything that has been written in it has to be true. And if the evidence in front of us shows that much of it is not, well, then that does draw a lot of doubt. I can understand why that would draw a lot of doubt on the rest of it, for sure.
Yeah, but it tells you that your interpretation of Genesis is wrong. Not that Genesis isn't about something that's that their God basically put down. I mean, there are ways to look at Genesis metaphorically that are kind of beautiful, actually.
Metaphorically, yes, of course. And in fact, that was the original intention, right? I mean, it's obviously written in a poetic sense, and the historical analysis of Genesis 1 and 2, it's, there are two separate stories. The first one is one that's about like sort of the killing of the previous gods, and that now there's a new God, and it's the God of the Israelites, and there's just a rebirth of the earth. And I mean, it's, we kind of understand that from our literary analysis of the Bible, but they can't see it that way. They have to take it as absolutely literal, that there's no room for metaphor or poetry. And I mean, I don't know. I kind of get it. Because if that is the stance that they're going to take, well, then, evolution does disprove it. It does. Yeah. I mean, and of course, not just evolution. There's all kinds of other sciences that disprove all kinds of parts.
Geology.
Sure. Just basic geology, but I mean, all kinds of things. All kinds. Anthropology, physics. Yes. Basic, our understanding of history. I mean, so much of it. And then if you want to get into the New Testament, just we can talk about what happened on the the Easter event with the rise of the Christ, but also 500 prophets wandering the streets of Jerusalem out of their tombs. Like, there's no history documentation of that event happening. You would think if Jerusalem is crawling with all these zombies of prophets wandering around,
somebody would have wrote about it.
Somebody would have wrote it down. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
how does that even happen? We've never ever seen the rising of zombies.
Yeah.
Has never ever been documented. But clearly,
I don't know if you know, but Minneapolis has 3,000 zombies running around right now with guns, and people are documenting the hell out of that.
The wilding sprees, I know.
Yeah. Anyway. So what was I going to say? Oh, the thing about Genesis and the idea of the original sin and the beginning of death. To me, that's a real strong metaphor for somewhere out on the savannah. Something happened with our brain, and we ended up with an extra cortical loop, where we were able to start thinking about our own lives and our own death, and it become known to us as a species that we're going to die. Your average cat or raccoon does not know that they're going to die. It's a complete surprise to them when it happens, right? But man acquired this extra ability, and knowing that you're going to die was the invention of death. To me, that's a metaphor that I like for it. So
sure,
anyway.
I can see that.
I mean, because that puts us in we're probably the only animal that has neuroses, right? Like, really, we're neurotic.
I don't
we sit
know.
around and think, oh, we're going to die. Oh,
sure.
Yeah, if you have cats, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there are neurotic animals without a doubt.
Oh,
and there are some animals that are a little bit more neurotic than others. Do they get neurotic over their own mortality? No, I don't think that's
the case.
Atheist F5K. Did you never watch Kill Bill? Because Uma Thurman was able to get up out of that grave.
Oh, okay.
By karate chopping her way out of it. So,
and I appreciate that. I appreciate that comment. But I think if I remember what it specifically says, and I don't know the precise ways that the dead were buried, but I think that they were buried in essentially like mausoleums. So I don't think that they actually buried their dead back then. I think that they put them into tombs. I might have that wrong. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it describes them walking out of tombs. And therefore it sort of makes sense. So then they can just get up and open.
The tombs were opened and the dead saints came out. The saints of God came out and began proclaiming whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, that idea that I have is something that I kind of wanted to name and write down, and that's the local or bounded historical naturalism. We try to, like, when you're dealing with a creationist, if you can't pin them down on that, like, pick a point on that timeline, and we're going to talk about evolution from there forward. We're not going to talk about the Big Bang. We're not going to change the subject, right? We're not going to extend the talk. So it's called LBHN. And then the other idea that I really like to hammer them with is what happens when you go from a zygote to a mouse or an acorn to an oak. Is there any supernatural intervention? And they'll say, oh, but God created the DNA information and all that stuff. It's like, no, the information is there. It's created, right? We already have the information. So now we're going to take that information naturalistically and create an oak out of an acorn, right? And they don't want to think about that. They never want to think about what they believe is natural today, what's happening today, right? And you could talk to them about microevolution, and they'll accept a lot of that, except now Rebekah doesn't accept the dogs and wolves, which I thought was hilarious. But
you were there for that, weren't you?
Yeah, you were there for that. In fact, he's really mad at you about that.
I guess. absurd. I mean,
she's like, what she said you were bullying her into believing this stuff, right? You're bullying her into believing it.
Right.
Yeah. It was like,
Yeah, I mean that's silly, obviously. I mean, it wasn't bullying. Of course, I'm being persistent.
Yeah.
And I look, I get why she doesn't want to accept it, because she doesn't have a good answer for where the cutoff is, right?
Right.
If you start accepting that different species are related to each other, that there's a common ancestor, she doesn't know enough of the data to know where that boundary should be. And the problem is, if she starts to accept any of it, including even the creationist consensus, well, then she knows that I'm going to pull out analysis that shows that it would have to be so many million years ago for that last common ancestor to be, and that therefore, one, you have to accept there would have to be this massive, like super rapid evolution since the flood, and she knows that I'm going to pin her down on that, and that also that as I have carefully gone through with her in a number of streams, why she doesn't want to talk about dogs right now, because I pointed out all of the interesting evolutionary novelty that we can find amongst the different canids, and that there are clearly new features that you can find in some species and that don't exist in the other species. Where did they come from? They were not front loaded. We know that because, well, we've been talking about orphan genes, orphan alleles, specific haplotypes that are very specific to certain lineages and not found in any other lineages.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why.
There was a point in that video. It was, is evolutionary adaptation a real phenomena? Where she, this wonderful point where she starts yelling at you. It's like, I've been down that road with you before. You tried to convince me about macroevolution, and I'm not going to listen to you anymore. And it's like, she's just not going to hear it, man. So it was just kind of telling, strongly telling of where she's at.
Very telling.
Yeah, she don't want to listen to you anymore. She's mad at you. She got mad at me about theology and spirituality because, I'm not the kind of atheist that she's used to dealing with, as far as my acceptance of, spirituality and all that stuff.
Right.
So she gets really mad at me. So she told me, I will not talk to you about religion anymore, ever.
Oh, interesting.
Ever. She didn't want to hear my ideas. Anyway. Yeah. I wish I could find it. I've got so many bookmarks on that particular video that I can't. I would never be able to find it, but maybe I can take a look. Yeah, because it was funny. It was just so funny. Pretty cool. Let's see. Where do you? I'm trying to figure out where you come in. There you are. Let's see. Maybe I can find it.
You're talking about the one where I followed you?
No, this is
previous one.
Yeah, previous one is evolutionary adaptation, a real phenomenon.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And that EXO guy that came on, he is just a box of rocks. Oh my God. And she's listening to him, and he's like, it had to be there in order for it to survive, right? So it had to be there already. So he's thinking like a phenotypic trait has to be there in order for it to be selected. And he just has such a juvenile understanding of how that works.
Right.
And she's just lapping it up. She's just eating it up. And that's where she came up with the whole dog thing.
Like she's feeling pressure because the arguments are convincing, and the evidence has been demonstrated for evolution, or quote unquote macroevolution. I'm not even going to use that word anymore. This is the last time ever I'm using that word, because evolution is just evolution. Doesn't matter if it's macro.
Right.
But at any rate, I think she's feeling that kind of pressure, and this guy is like a pressure valve because, wow, I can use my ignorance to just ignore all this evidence. And that's kind of what she's done, is saying, I don't have to accept that dogs come from wolves, even though we have recorded, breeding records and things like that.
Well, yeah, that EXO had one really good point, that if creationists allow that, then it's a slippery slope to admitting that evolution is is what happens, right? So he pointed that out. So his idea is we're just going to throw all that out. We're not going to believe in. I mean, the historical evidence that dogs were bred is just like kind of overwhelming. I don't know what they're doing with that.
It's absurd. I mean, it's insane. I've done a little bit of looking since that stream. I mean, I knew that there was a historical record of recent breeds, but it turns out like many breeds, a couple hundred breeds, are likely established over the last just several hundred years.
Yeah,
yeah.
The majority of them.
Yes, majority of them. Yes.
Yeah, greyhounds came from gray wolf, and isn't there some sort of gray wolf variety the ancestor of most dogs?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. And there's also a super interesting paper that I hope to review and probably just put up as a separate video on my channel of looking at doing like mitochondrial analysis of ancient genomes of dogs that are found in the in archaeological sites alongside humans. So it turns out like dogs were actually more genetically diverse in some ways 10,000 years ago, that there were dogs that were brought into North America when probably coming across the Bering Strait when people from Asia populated North America, and they made their way into South America, and there are dog fossils along with all of those archaeological sites. They diversified to some degree. Looks like most of those lineages completely died out. Almost all breeds are of European or Eurasian origin. So there were, of course, a different population of dogs that had been bred over the 10,000 years over that same time frame. There are only two exceptions. Chihuahuas have some Chihuahuas have mitochondrial DNA that is of the North American lineage of dogs, and then there's one other breed of dog. But all other dogs across the world are of European, Eurasian origin, and yeah, except for Chihuahuas to some degree.
Then you
it's like Chihuahuas are largely of European stock as well because they have been interbred with European dogs. It's just that there are lineages of Chihuahuas that do have mitochondria that are of the North American variety.
Then you came up with that herding genomic evidence for behavioral adaptation of herding dogs.
Yeah.
Did you find like some new genes or?
So it's not new genes; it's new haplotypes, right? A haplotype is a unique set of SNPs that you're going to find in a gene, and so it is in a gene. It's just that, and so in that study, they were looking at essentially the number, the variations of SNPs that differ between herding dogs and non-herding dogs, and they found some of these SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, for those that don't know, that seem to be unique in herding dogs, that differ from the other dogs. And there's a handful of these genes, and they analyze really only one of them, which is ephrin B1, which is a receptor within the ephrin family. The ephrins play a major role in brain organization. So like how the brain gets wired up is the ephrins play a role of that. So these are these proteins that get secreted as like axons are trying to snake their way through the brain and get wired up. And the ephrins have to bind to receptors, and that is part of the way that axons wire up, right? So, and then that's going to also determine like the numbers of genes that get, the number of neurons that get established, right? And so if you have more targeting of one brain area targeting to another brain area, as long as they create connections to postsynaptic neurons, they're more likely to survive, which could mean that those brain areas get bigger. Just one of many mechanisms how you can get changes in brain organization and brain size and that kind of thing. So so there's some of these haplotypes are unique to dogs. So that's one thing that this paper shows, that they're not found in any wolves at all, despite the fact that wolves are actually more genetically variable than all the dogs. So they're unique to dogs. And then one haplotype in particular seems to be well, at least it's related to herding behavior and herding dogs, and that they did this post hoc analysis as well, where they looked at they did a survey. So they just asked a bunch of people, like, hey, send us your dog's spit, and then answer this survey about like how toy directed they are and what kind of herding behaviors they do. And they found specifically that for the dogs that have this haplotype, that there was like a p-value down to like the -10 to the -4. So a highly significant difference, that if the dog had the haplotype, this herding haplotype, that they were very, very much toy directed. And there were other aspects of their survey that they found that was specific. So of course the people, that are sending this material in, and this was like a survey of 2,000 dogs. And so it's like a very, very clear behavioral phenotype that is related to this particular sequence that is unique within the dogs, and only some dogs, and it seems to be very particularly prominent in the herding dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really interesting, because
Super interesting.
the idea of how brain development and genetics, then brain development, can modify behaviors in, like, the adult animal, right?
That's
So
right.
the animal
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
through
we're
this
talking about the adult.
developmental phase.
Yeah.
And there's something like when I got into this whole thing like 26 years ago, the question I wanted to answer was why, across like 36 tribes, did they find out that men prefer a 0.70 waist to hip ratio? How could a brain do that, right? Like, how could brain wiring cause you to basically have a preference like that? And I never did answer that question. But what you're talking about is the same kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, it's something about these different cortical circuits, basically, has a proclivity for the thing to develop a certain behavior.
That's right. Yeah.
With interaction,
and you
right?
could
And that's
imagine,
really interesting.
the way that herding dogs act, that if there was a variant that originated like that in a wolf population, it might not be selected for. It might be selected out. You wouldn't necessarily want a dog acting that way, or sorry, a wolf acting that way, right? Like, that's going to be counterintuitive to what it is supposed to do as a wolf, to live out in the wild. But humans, as a selective pressure, well, we have a lot more space to play with, because we can keep all kinds of dogs alive, and we can have extraordinarily rigorous selection that we can place upon a dog population in order to get certain variants to survive. And that's obviously what happened in this case. I mean, it's haplotypes that exist just in some breeds of dogs. It does not exist in other dogs, and it's clearly related to a specific behavior. And of course, that's how it works. Like, could you teach any dog to herd? I don't know, maybe to some degree, but it's so obvious that the herding dogs are so much better at it than the non-herding dogs.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the reason why is because of their underlying genetics. And then since we're talking about a behavior, that means that since behavior is a manifestation of the activity of neural networks, that means that there must be some sort of change that happened to the genome that affected the way that their brains grow and the way that they're wired up. And that, obviously
something
that's
about the circuit.
Yeah,
something
of course.
about the circuit.
What it is, that's interesting, and we don't know.
Wouldn't it be wonderful to figure that out?
I would love to do that. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't quite know where to start, because I don't know much about dog brains, but I don't know. Wouldn't be up to me.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think it's ripe for that kind of work to be done. Yeah. And I think that
and the next maybe 50 years from now, we'll be at the point where we can start to understand psychology in terms of basically brain wiring plus development, that sort of thing, to some extent.
Yes. And that obviously experience is a big part of that too. Sure, of course. That I mean, that's one of the main things that brains do, is that they encode our experiences over time.
Right.
But the way that those things get encoded, and the nature of the kinds of things that get encoded, is very much just dictated by the existing circuits that are there. And much of the existing circuits is a result of the development of the brain, which is a combination of our genetics and our early environment, in utero, postnatal, nutritional, all those things are going to have a huge influence over what those brains look like. it's true in all animals, and certainly true in dogs, certainly true in humans. And then, of course, then the learning that occurs. That's what I mean by encoding experiences. That obviously has an impact as well, but it's the combination of underlying genetics and then the structure of the brain. There's a great book by oh gosh, what is his name? It's called Innate. And
Innate.
yeah. Let me
I'll
see.
find it.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yes. So the gene is kind of like the flapping butterfly wing that
Right.
leads to this through development, basically leads to these traits or possibility of these traits. If the animal develops in that environment. I'm pretty sure a herding dog that was raised in a suburban home and never saw a cow would not develop that trait in the same way, right? But it's
Not in
like
the
the
same way,
flapping of the butter.
but would be probably much better at it right out of the
Yeah.
get-go than, say, a Shih Tzu.
Yep.
Right. So it's by Kevin Mitchell. That's his name. Innate: How the Wiring of Our Brain Shapes Who We Are. And it's entirely about neurogenetics in humans.
I got to read this.
I just put a link into the live chat to that book.
Okay. Good.
It's a super great book.
Austin, hi there. Oh, Austin is muted. Hey.
Hey, I'm just finishing up my dinner.
You're a little bit, maybe it's my speaker, but you sounded a little warbled.
Yeah, that sounded totally warbled to me.
Warbled is a good word. I just invented that. So there you go. You heard it here first. Anyway.
I was just finishing up my dinner. That's what I said. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're still warbling a little bit for some reason.
Yeah,
you
was
got a
scratchy.
little mic problem.
Or he may just need to take a big drink of water.
Yeah, that could
know.
be.
Let me pop out and then pop back in real quick and see if that.
No, you're good now. You're good now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I do wish. I look forward to the day where we understand a whole lot more about brain development, neurology, and trauma, how experiences create trauma.
Yeah.
Because there just seems to be so much of it. And, we throw a lot of drugs at it, and, that doesn't seem to help in the long run. It would sure be be great to have a way to, personalize and customize treatments for trauma based on what we know about an individual's neurology and development.
Yeah. Yeah, we're learning a little bit about that with the default mode network, and basically there's these feedback things that we do in our when we're cogitating about depression and things like that, and we feed back into the system and we keep making it worse. It's kind of like poking a wound over and over again and making it worse. And we know a little bit about that, but there's a lot more to learn.
Yeah.
And there is this, this mechanism that we have particularly powerful in when you're 16 years old and, up to about 24, where you're willing to die in order to mate, right? Like, what the hell is that about? And is there anything that we can do about that? I mean, can we figure out how that thing becomes so powerful? This basically mating / romance urge that young people have that ends up screwing up their life. And I know a lot about that personally, trust me. But I know of a youngster that's really in trouble right now, and you can't break through to him by just talking to him because there's something going on in his brain that keeps bringing him back into it, right? And I think it's tied into that default mode network and a number of other things. And God, we need to learn more about this, and we need to get over this religious idea of the spirit mind and start teaching kids that their brain is made out of meat, and occasionally it's going to behave like meat.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Right.
You're not going to sit there and reason your way to everything, right? If you think you've reasoned your way to some bizarre thing like hurting yourself, you're fucking wrong.
Right.
Yes.
So
anyway.
No, absolutely. No, I totally agree. the other thing is, once you accept that brain is a biological entity, meat, as you said, and that
Yep.
all behavior is a manifestation of the activity of neural networks. If you can accept that, well, then it's okay to then understand that when the brain isn't working properly, or when we aren't acting properly, it's because the brain isn't working properly.
Yeah.
Perhaps there are things that we can do to help fix that. That then, and some of it is going to be, it could potentially be medication in some cases. It also could be, I think one thing that can sometimes be overlooked, but is also really, really important is, I mean, I hate to say it, but like the good wellness stuff that is talked about, decent sleep, eating well, and
Yep.
getting good exercise.
Yeah.
Like those are definitely like the three big things that help brain function for sure. And of course, they're the hardest things to do when you're not feeling well, but they can be quite helpful in
Yeah.
repairing a broken brain. Yeah.
And being somebody who basically was suffering from pretty severe mental illness in my youth, the most important thing to know about the brain is that it has this neuroplasticity. And there is this possibility. In fact, every single instant that we're sitting here talking right now, our brains, our personalities are changing constantly, minutely, right? Almost indetectably. But we're constantly changing who we are and how we see and perceive the world and life. And for anybody that's suffering from mental illness in their youth, they need to know that shit changes over time a lot. I can look at it from my 75-year perch here, back on my whole life, and man, I could have talked to myself and told myself so many things that would have helped. It would have saved me a lot of trouble. Anyway.
My personality just got a lot less hungry after eating that sandwich.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah,
You
it
eliminated
modifies.
anger.
Yeah, modifies. Anyway, so I mean, the thing is, there's hope with neuroplasticity, basically, and we're starting to understand ways of changing that. Through some drugs and meditation, and we're just on the verge of some wonderful news for people who are suffering. That you can change.
Dr. Chris, I'm a big fan. It's nice to finally talk to you in person.
You two have not met.
I watched your debate with Doctor. I hope you can hear the air quotes in my voice. Ken Tobin on the Order Carnivora, and it was great.
Oh, wow.
Remind me if you would. Are you somebody who used to be a young Earth creationist or intelligent design type, or?
No, I never was. So growing up, I didn't grow up in a particularly religious household. My dad wasn't particularly religious. My mom had grown up in a Christian Science household. And so there were times when where we would go to Christian Science churches. And so that was certainly eye-opening enough, because like the stuff they believe is just garbage. So
yeah, it's out there. I was in ROTC with a Christian Scientist who was one of my squad leaders. But so I know the conversation has kind of moved on past this point. I want to address it though. When Rebekah says you're bullying her, Dr. Chris, from her viewpoint, you are. And what you're doing, what you're bullying is her epistemology. You're beating up her certainty and trying to mug it away from her and replace it with curiosity. And that's very scary for her. And to her, it does feel like an attack. It does elicit a defensive reaction instead of a curious, thought-driven one. It's a protection. It's a survival reaction instead of an exploratory one.
In fact, you should be charged with assault with deadly evidence.
Deadly evidence, yeah.
No, awesome. Very well stated. I think that's exactly what's happening. I also think that I could bring down the, I don't know. I mean, look, I go back and forth on it. Like I want to have an approach that is friendly and courteous, but I also don't want to allow crap to go unstated or to go unchallenged. and I feel like I have an obligation to put out the truth and to tamp down disinformation and misinformation and lies. And I don't have a whole lot of tolerance.
Tough balance to strike for sure.
Yeah, you definitely have. It's just necessary for people who are in the know, who are experts in a particular field, to speak against the misinformation, because that's what it is. She can do what she can do because there are so many people who want to hear, I'm right about the young Earth creationism or whatever. Just remember to say please and thank you a lot. That's all you can do.
Yeah, it's nice to not have to experience any distressing, deep, profound conflicts between reality and your beliefs. And so if you're trying to convince somebody to experience a profound, distressing conflict between reality and their beliefs, that can be a hard row to hoe. That can be tough to. You have to develop the relationship with which you have the access to impose stakes that force an impetus on the person to experience that conflict, to accept it as valid, and that's difficult. It absolutely is.
Yeah, it totally is.
But real quick, as far as the Rorschach test of your picture on your profile picture there, I see my high school bully aggressively making love to my mother. We don't need to analyze that. That's fine.
Oh, no. I don't know if I see that.
Okay, are you in counseling?
That says a lot about you.
No, I said let's not analyze
that. I'm going to put you on the couch.
I think you need to check into this.
Yeah. So the one thing about young Earth creationism is that it is a form of conspiracy thinking.
Absolutely,
that's one thing that we have to recognize. Yeah, exactly, and that conspiracy thinking always starts with belief, and that precedes evidence. That is one of the keys. Like, they start with belief and then they start to seek evidence. The other thing is that it's part of their identity, right? So because they have adopted this belief and it's not evidence-based, they have to incorporate it into their identity, right? And that, like, they will have the development of their own, like, ways of talking about things, their own language, right? So I mean, all of this is very much like conspiracy thinking. And then the other thing is that there's it's like there's an emotional reward for being part of that group, right? The aggrieved, challenged group that you have the scientific consensus and the ivory tower is all fighting against you. And that's, they have developed this little in group where they can sort of self-reinforce this false worldview.
One of the things conspiracy thinking requires and propaganda requires is it requires a constant stream of indoctrination, so that people don't start thinking too much or thinking in the wrong ways too much. You have to have a constant no, microevolution's true, macroevolution's not, microevolution's true, macroevolution's not. It has to be a constant bombardment of the cult sanctioned ideas to keep thinking in line.
Right. Which is where their intense distrust of like institutions, of expertise, of like any sort of evidence that is challenging to their worldview, that immediate distrust, that they have to have that, otherwise it just blows up their worldview and the conspiracy, right? And the other thing is that, like, she's doing this pose of playing the skeptic, that, like, I am a skeptic, I'm here to challenge, I just don't believe that evolution can do these things.
Examining origins.
Right, examining origins.
Examining it and arriving at the conclusion that we were right all along. It all comes from God.
Exactly, but that's the thing. It's not skepticism, it's cynicism is what it is. It's because true skepticism would apply the skeptical framework broadly and fairly across all available hypotheses. And she clearly doesn't do that at all. Like, she has this entire barrier of absolutely applying zero any sort of scrutiny and skepticism towards her own worldview. In fact, she'll just say, like, of course there are problems with my worldview, and that but it's a faith acceptance thing, stuff like that. But the goal for her is to be cynical of anything that evolution provides, and that's where it's all built upon that distrust of institutions and expertise. So anything that's published, like, she just thinks that it has to be false if it happens to contradict her worldview, or support, evidence for evolution. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately then I mean, for me, it comes across as very sort of disingenuous and trolling in that way. I don't know if that's specifically what she's trying to do, although I think there's some good evidence that's probably what she's doing, because part of what she's trying to do is to,
the first 2 minutes of every broadcast she does is evidence that she's trolling us.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, that's actually some of the best evidence. Yes. Yeah, because it is a performance, but it's
Yeah, I think there's a very specific mechanic that's happening at the perimeter of the dogmatic young earth creationist perception, where evidence is stopped at that perimeter, and if it's scripturally allowable, it's permitted past the membrane. But if it's not scripturally allowable, it gets interpreted beyond recognition, or it gets straight up dismissed. Like, they'll straight up dismiss radiometry. Like, they'll say radiometric dating is wrong, and as opposed to other evidence, well, they're interpret it beyond recognition. You show them all of the human fossils, they say, oh, those are just completely apes and completely humans. They reinterpret the evidence to make it scripturally allowable, and then it's allowed past the perimeter. And I think the mechanism of what's happening at the perimeter of their perception is actually the issue. That's why discussing the content of science has little to no impact, because they've been coached and trained to interpret or dismiss evidence from the content of science in this way.
Yeah, I think that's very well stated. Absolutely, that's the case. Yep, it's absolutely the case that they've been coached, and that their modus operandi is to simply deny the evidence that contradicts their worldview, or to try to debunk it and with as much fervor as they possibly can, just simply discarding it or just ignoring it, in order to just keep this closed off worldview that they have carefully cultivated.
It operates on this mechanism that, like, it's not possible that God's world, that the thing that God actually authored, could be in conflict with God's word. I don't need to know how the evidence from God's world points to the truth of God's word. I just have to know that it does. And that gives them this feeling of intellectual invincibility, this feeling like they have super knowledge. And that's why you get these things where, like, they think they know more than actual experts, and they chastise people that they don't even really understand the conversation that's happening. Sometimes that's true. They don't understand that they're going up against this mechanic, this worldview that creates this semi-permeable membrane around their beliefs, that it's not possible for reality to be in conflict with their beliefs.
Right. Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. Yeah.
Yep.
The other thing that I find fascinating about creationism is that we have these institutes, right? You've got, like, Creation Ministries, Answers in Genesis, the Institute for Creation Research, and they're pretending to do, like, actual research, but it's to me, I was thinking about this, like, how similar creationism is to flat earthism, and some of the notorious like experiments that, like, flat earthers have done to try to say that, like, well, of course we're the true skeptic because we are really trying to test this. But it's always performative. And when they perform these experiments, or they have these debates, or if they have investigations, they're not really doing it in the way that, like, a scientist would actually do it. That this is more of a performance to signify that they have a true commitment to the cause. And then, of course, anytime that they find something that contradicts it, well, then the debate just gets discarded and they just move on without actually coming to any sort of resolution. I mean, like, the way the baraminology, for instance, and the way that that's been assessed within young earth creationism is a great example of that. That there's absolutely zero consensus about the kinds and what was on the ark, and the reason why is because, like, none of it works.
Well, that's because kind is the collective version of the word stuff or things. There's nothing there for them to base.
It's a pseudo taxon at best. Yeah.
Yes, it's a pseudo taxon, obviously, but they feel the need to do this because they have to. They have to pretend that they're trying to discover the truth, but it's a sign for them to illustrate, well, one, to gain support of the followers, right? Like these guys who have some expertise, they do get paid from these institutes, and they got to do something in order to justify that. But they also need to provide some material for the in-group, and it's just a commitment. It's their sign. It's their signaling to the broader group that they are fully committed to the group by doing these performances of.
Yes, denying or reinterpreting evidence is not seen as incuriosity or stubbornness. It's seen as commitment. It's seen as being faithful to the word of God. And the more convincing and compelling the evidence you're reinterpreting or rejecting, the stronger your faith. You're applauded for rejecting evidence. You're being told you're a good Christian, and all the people who are accepting non-scriptural interpretations of the evidence, they're lazy, they're weak, they're tempted by Satan, they're captured by Satan. And it's a way to reframe all this information that might make somebody who was genuinely more skeptical or more curious, might make them think something like, maybe my beliefs are in conflict with reality. It's a way to keep that from happening. Instead of somebody who's looking at a larger body of facts and evidence than you with a vastly superior epistemological method, they're just a brainwashed college professor who has paid all this money into the establishment and been given this power by the establishment. So they have sunk cost, and their perception is being, it's a lot of projection about how we're the ones who are actually not able to look at the evidence impartially and honestly because we hate God and we don't want God to be real. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling now.
Honest is never a word I can use to apply to creation scientist presentations. That's the strange thing, is there's so much dishonesty in the way they interpret evidence or whatever that it can be related to anything Christian. It's just so ironic.
It's funny that you bring up Answers in Genesis and Discovery Institute and all that, Dr. Thompson, because when I was talking about God's world can't be in conflict with God's word, they make those people sign a contract that says explicitly that is their viewpoint, that evidence can't contradict scripture. And if you ever find evidence that does contradict scripture, no, you didn't. You're not allowed to report it that way if you're going to work for Answers in Genesis or Institute for Creation Research. You can look at the language of these contracts, these statements of faith that they force their spokespeople to sign, and it is basically just an agreement to never do impartial science.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, never be impartial. Right. That performative nonsense I was talking about earlier, I mean, a great example of that is Tompkins. What's his name? Jeffrey Tompkins? The guy who tried to show that who baked all this analysis of comparing the human genome to the chimpanzee genome, claiming that it's like less than 80%.
He did the chromosome 2 stuff. Yeah,
that's right. Tompkins. He was doing that as well, and you talked about that. Of course, like Erica gets a given. Has a series of videos where she's totally debunked his work, but it's like
I totally wiped his butt.
Yeah, sorry. They circle the wagons on that track, and that's all part of that in group, and it's just what we're dealing with. And they can't disprove it because, as Austin was saying, like that would be in violation of the oath that they signed. So clearly, it has nothing to do with the actual evidence. They have a goal in mind, and then they just need to bake the evidence to match that goal. Belief precedes evidence in their case.
Yeah, I got to play you guys a little clip here, which I found it.
Oh, but nevertheless, you do at least agree, and I think most people agree, that dogs originated from wolves.
I'm not giving you that, Dr. Thompson. And we had a huge argument about this and you were desperately trying to get me to accept this. And then you know, I looked into it and I was like, okay, the dog and the gray wolf or whatever probably had a common ancestor.
Yes.
But then you kept expanding it and getting into, oh, the Maine wolf, the bush dog.
Oh, I'm not going there.
And I'm not giving you anything.
Nothing. So
nothing.
Nothing.
If you'll
You're not
excuse
getting
me,
anything.
If you'll excuse me, I need to go screaming to my pillow for about 10 to 15 solid minutes.
Isn't that a wonderful clip?
Unwilling to even accept that dogs and wolves share kind of
it's
ancestry.
like he's not giving you anything because
and then
you
recently, on the more recent one, she said that she wouldn't even accept that the different breeds of dogs share common ancestry.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yep. Fun. Anyway.
Crazy.
Yeah. I thought that was just a real telling clip, you know, where her mind has this big roadblock that she puts up, just, you know, like I don't know what an analogy would be to probably those little spikes they throw across the road when you're running when you're running from the cops, maybe. She puts one of those up and all of a sudden, you know, and she just stops, full stop. I'm not going to think about it. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, there was a geophysicist, a guy named Glenn Morton, who started off as a young Earth creationist, but once he became a geophysicist and he started working with the evidence, he couldn't ignore the fact that reality was in conflict with his beliefs anymore. And he wrote about this concept, Morton's demon, this demon sitting in the mind, but stopping evidence at the perimeter and either allowing it past, mutating it first, and then allowing it past, or to, you know, rejecting it and dismissing it. And that's basically the mechanism that I'm talking about is this idea that because reality can't be in conflict with my beliefs, if I see evidence that seems like it demonstrates that reality is in conflict with my beliefs, well, there must be something wrong with that evidence somehow. And it's like this circular logic that allows evidence to be filtered and curated down to just the things that support your worldview. Like if you tell Rebekah, oh, cells are so complicated and organs depend on each other and the brain disproves evolution, she's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, that fits. And that's allowed through. But if you say, well, look, you know, we know dogs come from this, well, that's a slippery slope. That's a dangerous slippery slope that could lead me to possibly accepting macroevolution. So nope, I'm not even going to give you that. Roadblock slam down. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But then it just looks absurd at that point. And it's obvious why. I mean, we use genetic evidence to determine relatedness within humans. And within breeds of dogs, and then from there it's pretty easy to then just go then to the next level, which is at the species level. And generally creationists do accept that, right? Because they do believe in macroevolution within kinds, if we want to use that term, that speciation does occur within kinds. But she knows that she can't because because I think she's aware enough of the kind of evidence I'm going to bring up, which will end up showing that it's incompatible with the young Earth. That's the problem. So that's why she doesn't want to allow any of it in.
Here's Morton's demon, Glenn Morton, 1950 to 2020. He passed away.
Is he also the guy that
geologist? What's that?
Nothing. I just said, is he the guy that made the salt? Because Morton's salt.
Oh, Morton salt. He might have been.
We need more sound effects. I need
more. Well,
yeah.
He did rub a lot of the anti-creationism content he created from the internet because he felt Christians were getting beat up too bad with it. So in a way, he did produce quite a lot of salt.
Oh, I see what you did there. Thank you. Thank you for recovering my bad joke.
Pretty good. The unseen mental bouncer at the club door of your mind. The Morton's demon. Yep, pretty cool. Okay. Hopefully I can find a link here for that. Okay.
You know, this idea of Morton's demon also applies to like I did. I went from being a fundamentalist to pretty conservative Christian, so I kind of lightened up there. But it was just excuse my language, a mind fuck, trying to uncouple all the you are falling into Satan's trap. You're supposed to believe God's word and stand on God's word and never waver. How can you be thinking that there's no God? Things like that. It really is with a lot of social support to reinforce those fundamentalist beliefs. It's a really tough thing to unravel from your mind. All these mechanisms of defense, I guess you would call them.
Yeah, like the quintessential metaphor for ontology and epistemology is the terrain, the filter, and the map. And the terrain is the real world, and we all have a filter, a way we look at the real world, and a map, a model of the real world we built using our filter. And a superior epistemological filter and map is one that's allowed to change in whatever way it has to map most accurately to the terrain. And the fault and failure of a dogmatist's filter is that their map is not allowed to change in certain ways. They're not allowed to change their map to a map that doesn't give glory to God. And in that way, evidence is not impactful. It doesn't precipitate the pressure that causes a need for change.
Yeah, I think one thing that started to not towards really atheism, but towards my first step was accepting evolution. So sometimes the creationists are right when they say, first they're going to believe in evolution, then eventually they're going to become an atheist. Well, if if those guys hadn't developed their fundamentalist beliefs, maybe I wouldn't have ended up an atheist. I don't know. But the point is,
interesting to think about. Yeah,
I remember reading an article. I think it was like in the Smithsonian magazine, and they were describing this one particular fossil they had found, and talked about the context in which it was found, and the way they described it, as being limestone, and you could see certain ripples in the limestone, which indicated, it was just a calm, warm, shallow pool, and in which the limestone would, or whatever it's called, would kind of fall out into the bottom of the sea, and it was just such a reasonable portrayal. It wasn't using scientific language, but it was using the language that we all recognize of creatures in nature, and nature doing its thing. And that's how we got these fossils, and that's how we got the limestone, and how we can tell what it was like millions of years ago. So that kind of opened, just kind of got the crowbar out and just kind of made some room for that. And then I read some books from people who were not young earth creationists, but they weren't theistic evolutionists. And there was actually at one point back in the, I guess, 80s, because I was reading all these books in the early 90s, where people kind of had a middle ground between total secular evolution and old earth, I guess you would call it old theistic evolution. And I saw that spectrum. I was able to accept it rather than be binary. And so that was kind of, and if figuring out ways to allow staunch young earth creationists to go through that process, that's kind of the key.
Yeah.
They might consider you being tricky like the devil, but it's just a way of helping people understand you don't have to see things binarily, and that is the problem, as Mike has said earlier.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All I needed to become brave enough to step out of the psychological prison I was in was to have one figure that I trusted, my grandmother, tell me that my curiosity wasn't evil, that my confusion wasn't satanic, that asking questions is a good thing, and having permission to explore things without being afraid of being condemned to the pit or missing out on God's eternal love. And once I had the freedom to explore without being terrified of the implications, the evidence, I was finally able to experience that conflict, and that was able to create the pressure that caused me to go from being a young earth creationist to an old earth creationist to an intelligent design type to a theistic evolutionist to now where I just dropped theism entirely and just accept evolution.
So when I was 8 years old, a Presbyterian pastor told me about old Earth evolution, basically, and a old Earth interpretation of Genesis when I was like 8 years old on the front steps of the church in Mount Aaron, Minnesota in 1958 or 59, which is pretty amazing. And that was not the reason that I ended up being an atheist by the time I was 10. The reason I was an atheist because I didn't see any evidence of God, and I didn't really care for the magic zoo boat story. So I didn't buy that one either. I mean, it just didn't make any sense, but it had nothing to do with evolution. That was explained to me, and it was compatible with
Vesuvian doppelganger, your question is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, because you have been taught by the people who coach and train you on how to interpret evidence that, oh my gosh, these silly, ridiculous evolutionists would rather believe that they're fish than believe that they are divine, unique creations of God. And that has been allowed through the semi-permeable barrier. And now that is a part of the body of facts that you're looking at. But the body of facts that's right outside the perimeter of your perception that you're not going to let through that semi-permeable barrier is that fish is a pseudo-taxon. It's effectively meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. Over half of the major animal phyla include organisms that have been denoted as fish. Cuttlefish are mollusks. Jellyfish are cnidarians. And what we actually are is a variety of osteichthyes, which talks about a bone structure that is common to all organisms that have descended from this line of bony fish that evolved into the first land-going animals. Dr. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong on this.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, I couldn't study it better than myself. Yeah, I mean, it's and there's a reason why when you compare the genomes of a goldfish to a human being, and then you also include sharks, that in fact humans and goldfish have more in common in their genomes than either of them do to sharks. We nest together because we are all part of osteichthyes.
I got a wonderful book.
I mean, how else would you explain that pattern, right? Like you have to have some sort of explanation for why humans and birds and snakes and frogs would all nest within the osteichthyes, and all the other bony fish are more similar genetically to all those other groups that I just talked about than they are to sharks.
It's a common designer, Dr. Chris. You see a common design, that means there's a designer.
That doesn't make sense to me because a shark and a fish look a lot more similar to each other than fish do to humans. I hate that argument so much.
I've got a wonderful book called Bones and Cartilage that gets into the really interesting thing about fish and their cartilages and bones, and they have more types of bones and cartilage than we do, and we lost a few of them. But it's interesting because some diseases that happen to humans kind of harken back to those odd little types that fish had. So understanding disease of bones in humans depends a little bit on the evolution from fishy type things or osteichthyes.
Yeah, our dentary bones, understanding our jawbone depends on it completely.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And the inner ear bones, the origin of those. Yeah. I mean, all this is well documented, but it's a super interesting story. The history of that and the fossil evidence for it, the embryological evidence for it, that these three little tiny bones that make up our inner ear used to be part of our jaw, or ancestors of us.
So, Dr. Thompson, what are you doing these days? What are you researching? What are you?
I'm still doing the same research. So, and you started off with that I hadn't emailed you in a couple of months, or that I hadn't answered emails in a couple of months because I have moved institutions. So I'm no longer at the old place where you were emailing me. So I'm at St. Mary's College in Maryland. I'm in their biology and neuroscience program there, teaching neuroscience and biology. I have my own lab as well, where I'm working on, the same stuff that I was. The little icon that I have there is the animal that I still work with. So Xenopus laevis tadpoles, and working on how environmental contaminants interfere with how those brain circuits grow, using the tadpole as an animal model. And so I focus on aspects of like things. So I'm working on I have one project that's funded through a grant where we're looking at the effects of the heavy metal lead on its impact on how thyroid hormone gets into the developing brain. And we're using tadpoles as our animal model.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's fun stuff.
Do you know anything about those mutant frogs in Duluth, Minnesota? Have you heard of those? There was, I guess there was just a massive amount of mutated frogs in, I think it was around Duluth, Minnesota. And I can't remember when it happened, but I'd have to look it up, check it with ChatGPT.
Are these the frogs that had eyes inside of their mouths?
They had all kinds of weird shit going on. I mean, there were many types.
Sounds like it was a long time ago. So it was in the 90s?
Okay.
But,
yeah, something like that, maybe.
But it's still a mystery. Yeah, there's a bunch of articles on it.
Yeah.
Don't let Alex Jones find out about it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's up in my neighborhood.
Turn the freaking frogs gay.
Yeah. My mom insisted that I was one of those mutants. So
yeah,
that's how she explained me.
There's a picture of it.
You know what? You frogs. Being a mutated frog would explain a lot.
It would explain a lot. Yeah.
Now I have to confess, like, all right, I know a lot more about frogs than most neuroscientists for sure, but I'm not a frog biologist. So there are other biologists out there who know their frogs. I am a neuroscientist first, and I use them as an animal model through which I can kind of discover things about the brain. So
I think that would fall under the umbrella of herpetology.
Yes. Indeed. And I am not a herpetologist. Again, I know more about frogs than most neuroscientists, but there are a lot of other people out there who know a lot more about frogs than I do. Even hobbyists, they'll know a lot more. And so I'll tell people about like what I do, and I'll meet someone who like keeps frogs and knows a lot about the different species. I'm like, that's good. I don't know much. I actually spend a lot more time with the tadpoles than I do with the frogs. But this is something very related, obviously, because there must have been some kind of environmental impact that was causing this for these deformed frogs. There's a picture on the Minnesota Public Radio News, a whole article on this. This is already now 12 years old, this article, but they got pictures of these deformed frogs. I can put that in the chat.
So that was in the 90s?
Apparently. I mean, that's according to this article.
Yeah, I found Copilot said it was 1995.
Yeah, that's what
they suspected parasites, habitat change, contaminants, but never a single universal cause, and it's still a partly unresolved mystery.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've been doing research on the St. Louis River waterway that drains the entire Iron Range into the Lake Superior around Duluth. And so if it happened in 1995, we were doing a lot of drugs back in the 60s up there, like in Virginia, at the head of that waterway. So maybe it was our drugs seeping into the river. That's my theory.
It certainly could be.
It could be, yeah, because we did a lot of drugs back then. So, a lot of acid.
Yeah. No, I mean, without a doubt, like human habitation does have a big impact on waterways. There's another compound that I've been working on. I've got to get these papers out. I've got 2 papers that I'm sitting on. I'm hoping to get one of them published this year on the effects of triclosan on aspects of brain development. So one of these is already available as a preprint. So when we're trying to publish scientific articles, right, we got to get them put out into a journal, so it's got to go under scientific review, but you can also submit it as a preprint. So there are several archives where, and one in particular is BioRVX, which is for the biological sciences, where you can put one of these preprints up and available. So it's available there, and if someone wanted it, I'll turn our cameras on. But the handsome man, look at that. Both of you guys.
I don't think a camera's going to help this face.
Yeah. But triclosan is an antimicrobial, antifungal agent that was widely used in all kinds of consumer health products, and it was like a heavy pollutant, one of the top 10 pollutants that we could find in waterways near human habitation. It was making its way into the wastewater treatment stream, and it was very difficult to remove. And there's some evidence that it may impact aspects of like how the brain works, so especially in developing brains.
Yeah.
But it's been quietly removed by companies that had been using it widely, because it's not the only ways that it was regulated were if they were making some sort of specific health claim with it. One of those companies was Colgate. The Colgate Total used to have triclosan in it. And then in 2018, the FDA said, look, we have evaluated triclosan. We see that companies are putting it into soap because it's an antimicrobial agent. So why not add it to soap, right? We want to kill bacteria. The problem is soap just by itself is really good at killing bacteria. So what is the point of putting something else that kills bacteria? These tests that the FDA did is that they found that the triclosan in soap had no more of an effect on killing bacteria than soap without triclosan. So they're like, okay, stop putting triclosan in soap. They made a rule. And then all of a sudden, companies just started to pull it out of all kinds of products, including toothpaste, mouthwash, deodorants, cosmetics, body washes, all kinds of other consumer health products. And then over the last 5 years, it's just basically it's decreased quite a bit. So now its incidence in waterways has gone down by like 80%, which is good. But I also have some reasons to think that it may have impacted brain development in those individuals that were affected.
Young Earth creationists, particularly.
Yeah, perhaps, potentially.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, skeptic philosophy is absolutely right. We all need to start working out and doing lots of sit-ups and push-ups until we're all as buff as Terry Crews. Then when we come on to do these live streams, we'll talk about science completely shirtless, and we'll get tons of people tuning in. It'll be great. Science will be the most popular thing on the internet in no time.
And we could live stream our 4 a.m. 4-hour workout sessions.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So Scott, you're in what's his name? Cordova, Sal Cordova's house.
Am I? I did not know this was his house.
Yeah, that is Sal Cordova's house.
How embarrassing.
I've seen him in it a number of times. Anyway.
I think a lot of people use that one. I just grabbed the clearest one I could look at without glasses on.
It's a beautiful piano.
What other voices are.
Beautiful piano, yeah. Nice fireplace too.
I'm thinking of taking lessons.
Yep. Anyway, guys, well, I kind of want to get out of here.
I'm going to do an open mic here in a minute.
Yep.
I hope I made my point on this basically local bounded historical naturalism, and people should use it when you talk to creationists. And if they want to move from that mark, you got to keep bringing them back to it. Otherwise, the conversation's over. You got to pick a point and start talking about it, whatever it is. So anyway,
true.
Yep.
Easier said than done. Easier said than done.
So, which email is the other one? Your channel one, right?
The one I replied to. That's a good email to get a hold of me. It's the one I've got associated with my YouTube channel. So.
Okay, yeah,
I don't check it
more stuff
on the regular, but I should be checking it like at least once a week. So if there's been a little bit of a delay, just be patient. Yeah.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we should do some things together.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Some interesting stuff. I'm working on a couple of different software projects that are really interesting. One of them I'm really excited about with genetics and being able to, I pulled a bunch of data and I'm massaging and trying to get it to the point where I can do an actual reasonable comparison between chimpanzees and humans. And if the young Earth creationists will pay me $180,000 a year, I will make a very good case for why we are not related to chimps. I just want to put that out there, but the number is 180,000. Anything less than that, And I'm going to have to tell you that we are in a lot of the work I did, it was like 99.2% is what I was finding for the genes. And most of those differences were synonymous changes. They weren't, they didn't matter. Pretty interesting.
I have a similar offer where for a few $1 million, I will solve the heat problem for young Earth creationists.
Oh, cool.
So if you just want to write that check out and sign it, I'll get you my solution to the heat problem real quick and skippy afterwards. So just let me know.
Yep. Anyway. Okay, guys, you ready to end? Get out of here. Everybody?
I think this should be over.
Okay. So I'm gonna say it and I'm gonna do it. Goodbye, cruel world.
Goodbye, cruel world.